Dune and the French Dispatch hit theaters at long last as the latest trailer for The Batman is released and tragedy strikes instead of the upcoming Alec Baldwin film Rust. I'm Joe Acierno.
And I'm Darius Delsoin. This is Cinema Unchained.
Before we talk about the crazy new trailer for The Batman, don't forget to like, follow, share, subscribe, and hit the bell to get all notifications whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Pandora, YouTube, and so much more. Alright, now before I get into my review of the French Dispatch, the new trailer was released out of the most recent DC FanDome for the upcoming Batman film. And I'm going to be honest, when I heard that they were doing Batman for, another time, right? I think this is the second or third cinematic incarnation in our lifetimes. We were both born in 1997. I'm like, do we really need another Batman? The Dark Knight Rises it's not even a decade old yet. Do we really need this? And I'm going to be honest, after watching the first trailer that was released last year, with all the craziness going on, I'm like, okay, I think there might be something here. And especially after watching this trailer, I'm not skeptical at all anymore. I'm honestly super, super excited. I'm surprised at how excited I am for this film.
Yeah, same here. Especially me as a DC fan, I'm a Batman fan, love Batman. It's just, to me, I remember when they first announced it and they said Robert Pattinson was Batman. I will be frank, I was in that group of the Twilight guy? I don't know. But then over time, I saw other movies he was in and I was like, okay, I can see it now. But then the first trailer from last year blew me away. I was like, I'm in. Mm-hmm. The first trailer already sold me. The second one was just nerdgasm to my ears. I loved everything. So I'm just personally completely sold. I have faith in Matt Reeves. I'm excited. I'm ecstatic. I need March already. That's I need March already.
Yeah, no, right? This movie is currently supposed to come out on March 4th of 2022. And going back to, what you're saying as far as it being, a nerdgasm for the ears or whatever crazy sentence you put together a few seconds ago. I really did enjoy, how they used that Nirvana song in both trailers. And I heard a little bit of it here, and I'm like, this still kind of fits. But then it transitions into something else that just manages to be even darker and just sell it even more. And, it really, so far, again, let's be real, this is still, marketing at this point. It really sells that dark and grimy, aesthetic and atmosphere. And again, I always thought that Christopher Nolan did that to the max with his Dark Knight trilogy. But then, I feel again, watching this, I'm like, I think this might already outdo Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy in terms of, again, just how gloomy it all feels. And I agree with you too. Matt Reeves, I think he's got a pretty solid track record so far. He did Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, War for the Planet of the Apes. He did Cloverfield. He did another horror movie that came out, I think about a decade or so ago, called Let Me In. I caught bits and pieces of it, and from what I saw, that was really good. And honestly, this has a good looking cast too. On top of Robert Pattinson, again, I was, when it came to him being casted, when I found out about that, I had already seen him in The Lighthouse. So I'm like, you know what? This is an interesting pick. I think he can do very well. Because I remember a lot of people were very, very skeptical. And, I think a lot of people are going to start to come around and be like, okay, maybe, he's more than just a Twilight guy. Because, again, he's come a very long way since the Twilight movies. It's weird. He was Cedric Diggory in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Best Harry Potter movie, in my opinion. Maybe unpopular, whatever. And I thought, he was fine in that. Then, he was in the Twilight movies. That set off his career. But, let's be real, it didn't do a lot of things for him as an actor, honestly. And showing off exactly what he could do. Because he wasn't given so much to work with. But then, he comes back to do, a bunch of, indie films, during and after the Twilight saga. Namely, like I said, The Lighthouse, which is a fucking crazy movie, and he is phenomenal in it. So he, like I said, he's come a very, very long way. And on top of him, you have Andy Serkis as Alfred. I think he's an interesting choice. Jeffrey Wright, Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman. Colin Farrell as the Penguin. I want to see how that goes. That's, again, I don't have a problem with it. It's just weird. When I read that, I'm like, it's interesting, but I'm not really sure what to think about that.
Yeah, Colin Farrell's Penguin, I guess that was definitely an out. Originally, I think it was supposed to be Jonah Hill they were trying to get.
I think that rings a bell. I think I remember that.
Yeah, but yeah, going back to what you're saying with the whole gloomy aspect, it's that's one of my favorite aspects of this film. To me, it reminded me a bit of Batman Year One, and that's something that Matt Reeves has talked about greatly, especially during the DC FanDome panel when he was talking about this is a Bruce Wayne that is literally just becoming Batman, but it's not necessarily the Bruce Wayne that we typically see in multimedia, where it is this cold, reserved person that can handle his emotions. No, this Bruce Wayne, this Batman, he's gonna go all out, right? He is not as reserved as we think he is. And so hearing Matt Reeves talk about that, the aesthetic of Gotham and how it reminds me of, like, you know, old England era, as well as Batman the Animated Series, has me very excited. And, like, very much like, I think Matt Reeves actually fundamentally understands Batman to its core, unlike previous, or at least the latest incarnation of Batman with the Justice League movie of Zack Snyder's version. This feels like what Zack Snyder was trying to do, and Matt Reeves is like, I'm gonna do what you were trying to do, but even better. And I'm not trying to throw shade at Snyder, he did the best he could, everything, but to me, this feels like very much, this is a Batman that has not tapped into his emotions yet and doesn't have really full control. He is still angry. He is still bitter, and I really like that.
Yep. Yeah, same here. And again, like, you know, going with how, you know, one thing that I feel with this so far is that this doesn't feel so much like a comic book film. Again, this feels like something much darker, something much heavier. And one thing that really makes me feel that every single time is when I watch that final upside down shot of Batman walking away from, like, the fire as he comes towards the camera, because when the Penguin's car was flipped over and he's just slowly walking through, that music is just like hamming it up, chills every single time I've watched that. And I can't wait. I absolutely can't wait. Now, this is also supposed to come out in IMAX. Are you seeing this in IMAX?
Am I seeing this in IMAX? Of course I'll come, because I'll see this in IMAX. It has IMAX right over it for me. I gotta see it. I have to.
I'm really looking forward to this. I think this is gonna be a great time. You know, I think this is gonna find a way to separate itself from other Batman films.
Absolutely. So I'm excited. Can't wait for March 4th. I gotta get my Batman shirt. I gotta get that ready.
For all you guys that are with us right now, do you have any thoughts on the upcoming Batman? Like, obviously something as big as this, be a little weird if you didn't. Do we even need another Batman? And again, any answers that you have to either of those questions, comment wherever it is that you can.
So on to the next topic. Joe, you apparently have seen The French Dispatch. Let me know, what did you think of that movie? Like, honestly, what did you honestly think? I know for me, I wasn't too big on it, but you got a chance to see it. What are your thoughts?
I'm not going to take up too much time because this is a solo review. The French Dispatch is the newest film from acclaimed filmmaker Wes Anderson, who's also done films like Moonrise Kingdom, The Royal Tenenbaums, and The Grand Budapest Hotel, if you've heard of any of them. And the film is basically an anthological collection of stories published in the final edition of an American newspaper located in a fictional 20th century French city. And again, you know, just talking about that concept, I'm going to be honest, it's definitely pretty unique, and I do appreciate the film for going for something like this. Now, this is another film that, of course, was originally slated to be released last year, but got pushed back because of, you know, surprise, surprise, COVID-19. And I'm going to say that after waiting a whole extra year in order to be able to watch this film, I can honestly say that I was not crazy about this film. And now here's the thing. I usually like, you know, the whole sort of indie art house sort of film. So if you don't, then this film is definitely not for you. Another thing I will say that I usually like is Wes Anderson. I usually look forward to his films when they come out. I love The Grand Budapest Hotel. That movie is his magnum opus. That movie is his masterpiece. I also love his animated work. Isle of Dogs and Fantastic Mr. Fox are both excellent. And there's also another film, you know, again, like I mentioned before, Royal Tenenbaums, came back a little further back, which is also a pretty solid movie too. One movie that of his that I have seen before this one that I really did not like was Moonrise Kingdom. And unfortunately, The French Dispatch is closer to that one than any of Anderson's better work. But let me just get out of the way the stuff that I actually did like about The French Dispatch. And again, that was the film's craftsmanship, the whole artistic and technical end of everything going on with this film. One thing I will say, and again, this is definitely trademark Wes Anderson, is I love how he composes his shots. It feels very unique, and it's just, again, for lack of a better way to say it, it's just always, you know, really pretty to look at. It always stands out. And another thing that I definitely appreciated was how like the visual cues and transitions with conveying certain details, I thought how he went about that in this film was really cool. I don't want to give too much of that away. Check it out for yourself. Again, another thing too is the film's production design. Everything from like the sets to the costumes and the makeup, all of these, plus the cinematography, helped immerse me in the world of the film. So on a technical, like I said, a technical and craftsmanship end of things, this film is very, very well made. Wes Anderson is obviously no stranger to making a well-made film. The French Dispatch is no exception in that department. Another thing that The French Dispatch is no exception to in comparison to other Wes Anderson films is the jam-packed cast with so many big names for me to really be able to list all of them. But again, of course, the cast includes regulars like Bill Murray, Tilda Swinton, Owen Wilson, and Frances McDormand, but also has a couple of newcomers like Jeffrey Wright, Henry Winkler, and of course, Timothée Chalamet. Now, between The French Dispatch and Dune coming out, I think it's safe to say that all the, Timothée Chalamaniacs out there are having a really good weekend. But now, again, I have to just get into really what sunk this movie for me. And I just couldn't connect emotionally to anything happening in the story. The film, in terms of the film's narrative, that end of things lost my attention within the first half hour. And really all I cared to look at was the pretty pictures. That's basically it. And the reason for that, the big reason for that, is because it was all just too quirky for my liking. And it was just to the point where it made me not care about any of the characters. Again, this is more so reflected in the dialogue. It tried too hard to be like, trademark, peculiar Wes Anderson characters and like the idiosyncratic word choice and just how they talk. It made it hard for me to not only follow along to much of the details that were thrown at me, but again, to just not care about these people. Again, maybe it's just me, and I just have a hard time, relating to that sort of person. But again, like I've seen a few of Wes Anderson's other films, and this sort of style that he has didn't bother me with those other films that I listed before that I really did enjoy. So I think it was just like an overload of Wes Anderson trying too much to be like Wes Anderson when he and his collaborators wrote this particular script. And this movie made me realize how much odd I can handle in a movie. Because like I always think that like, with how weird certain movies can be, people say like, oh, this movie's weird, that, and this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, oh, I don't have a problem with weird. I can handle weird. I can handle odd. And this movie made me realize just how much that I can actually handle and how much of that is actually too much for me. And it's unfortunate because the strangeness in the storytelling of this film outweighed the craftsmanship of the film, which I honestly loved. Now, again, just from a movie-going point of view, this was honestly, I got to see this at the Alamo Drafthouse down in Brooklyn, and this is my first Alamo Drafthouse experience ever. I tried going once before, but the R train was taking its sweet time that day. I didn't get there on time, so therefore, I didn't get to go into the movie. And also, without embarrassing this particular person, I honestly did have some wonderful company with me. So, marrying both of those aspects of my movie-going experience with this film, I wouldn't change for the world. The only thing I would change about this experience is picking a different movie. So, that's just where I am as far as all this. So again, for all of you guys, what did you think of The French Dispatch? Is there something that I'm just not getting with this film, or is it really just a matter of taste? Let me know in whatever comment section you can. Okay, now before we get into the unfortunate circumstances following the set of Alec Baldwin's Rust, don't forget to like, follow, share, subscribe, and hit the bell to get all notifications whether you're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Podchaser, and more. And follow our social media pages in the description. And now, before we cap off the show with our review of Dune, the set of Alec Baldwin's next film, Rust, was struck with tragedy when a prop gun was discharged by Baldwin, accidentally killing the film's director of photography, Halyna Hutchins, and injuring the film's director, Joel Souza. Baldwin, of course, is not only an actor, but a producer on the film as well. Now, I'm going to be honest, like, when I first read this headline, I'm like, holy shit, like, this, like, something like this happening with such a major star is just fucking insanity.
Yeah.
And it's really weird. Like, again, we have like a rough idea as far as like, the usual kind of like protocols that go into place with this sort of thing. Again, especially with a film concerning a major star like Alec Baldwin. And it makes me wonder exactly what happened, because according to the LA Times, anonymous crew members on set, complained or excuse me, according to anonymous crew members, um, told the LA Times about like on-set safety issues and misfires, like days before the incident happened, and also too, hours before that incident happened, half a dozen crew members walked off set to protest the set's working conditions. So even though Baldwin has been questioned by the authorities, and as of now, no one's been arrested or indicted yet, something feels very, very strange about all this. And again, tragic for sure too, because again, you have Halyna Hutchins. My sympathies, my condolences for her and her family, and I hope that the director heals quickly as well. But with everything going on with that incident, something feels very fucking weird. Is it just me?
No, yeah, it's odd because I mean, let's face this is very unfortunate. My condolences goes out to the cinematographer's family and even the director. I hope he gets well. And it's just upsetting because for me, as I heard this news and then I found out he was a producer, I was like, okay, how did this even happen? Like, how did you just take a gun and be like, all right, let me risk it? And apparently this happened during rehearsals. So even during rehearsals, I still find it weird that did anyone check what system did they put in place to make sure there weren't any bullets? Not only that, why were there live rounds? Even if there were, like, let's say rubber or whatever, why were there live rounds, I guess, during the rehearsal using the gun and pointing it at the DP, apparently, when he was trying to get something, I guess, right. Again, it feels very odd. He did come out with a statement recently, I think, on Twitter about it, and I felt that was an odd statement too. But again, it's like, what was the system put in place to ensure the safety of every crew member? Because again, no matter the production, safety is key and number one.
Of course, absolutely. And again, as far as going back to your point, as far as what you were saying, like, why is it pointing at the DP? The only thing I could think of is that, like, you have a lot of shots where, like, it's a head-on shot and someone's shooting a gun. That's the only thing I could think of. The DP, of course, is like, in the vicinity behind the camera, even if he or she is not operating the camera, so to say. So he or she is in that area. That being said, according to court records, Baldwin was told that the gun was cold before firing, right? He was handed the gun by the AD, and he said, the gun's cold, meaning, there shouldn't be a problem. That being said, if you're holding the gun, if you're the person actually holding the gun, you should always make sure that's actually the case. It was one of the things that I'll never forget when I was taught when I went shooting for the first time. If you're pointing a gun at someone, you have to be prepared to kill that person. You have to be prepared to kill whatever is in front of you if it's loaded. You're dealing with a death machine. If this is what you're doing, you're using a prop. I don't care if the gun is if it's a plastic gun that was made in China. You're on a set, you're pointing at someone, you fucking make sure that there's nothing actually to be concerned of. If you're the person holding a gun. I don't care if 5 people told me beforehand. 5 different people handled the gun before me, and they all told me that, hey, it's fine. I'm checking it myself.
Exactly.
And if something seems off, you act accordingly. So, honestly, I think there was a lot of carelessness here. There's either a lot of carelessness or, again, something else might be up to. Who knows what could be going on these movie sets, right?
Yeah, I mean, and, like you said, going back to the whole making sure you have guns in around, no matter what, even if the person told you, you are in control of that gun, you have to check yourself. It's up to you. And it's not, you don't rely on other people because, let's say so, you don't know if they actually checked or anything. They probably lifted it and be like, oh, it looks relatively, it has weighty, but you can actually tell the difference of weight between a gun when it has rounds in it and when it doesn't. There is an actual difference. I've gone shooting too. So it's like there is a physical weight difference when you have live rounds and when you don't. But again, it's just unfortunate this happened. Again, my condolences goes out to the family and everything, and I hope the director gets well soon, and I hope all this gets resolved as soon as possible because this is really unfortunate.
Yeah, again, it's just one of those things where the more I find out about the story, the more tragic it becomes. According to Baldwin, he's in touch with the family of the victim, And again, as of us recording this episode right now, no one has been arrested or indicted.
No.
But who knows what could happen next? I know there's a lot going on in terms of investigating everything that went on here. So it's definitely a tragedy, but I think there are definitely certain lessons that can be learned from all this too, unfortunately. And it's unfortunate that a lesson like this, a tough lesson like this, has to be learned, right? But yeah. So again, if you haven't heard about this by now, I don't see how you wouldn't have heard about this by now. Because again, like I said, something concerning someone like Alec Baldwin, a tragedy of this magnitude, there's no way you haven't heard of it at this point. Leave what are your thoughts on all this? Leave your thoughts wherever it is that you can. And now to cap off the show, at long last, I finally got to. I didn't just get to see Dune. I got to see Dune in IMAX. And for all you that don't know what this is about, based on the classic novel by Frank Herbert, Dune follows a young ducal heir as his family is ambushed when assigned to govern a dangerous desert planet. The film was directed by Oscar nominee Denis Villeneuve, who's also done Blade Runner 2049, Sicario, and my personal favorite of his, Arrival. And the film stars Timothée Chalamet, Rebecca Ferguson, Jason Momoa, Josh Brolin, and Oscar Isaac. Now, again, this is a film that I've been looking forward to for a very long time. It was supposed to come out in October or December of last year. I think it was December of last year. It was supposed to come out. And, of course, it got, delayed due to COVID, like many other films of 2020. And I was so pissed. I was so fucking pissed when I found out that this movie was getting delayed about a year. But on the upside, it gave me more time to to read the book, which I hadn't done in a while before watching a movie that was based on a book, so that felt nice. And while it sucked that I had to wait another year longer to watch this film, after watching it, this is so worth the wait. Because honestly, this movie, in my opinion, is a win on every level. This is, without a doubt, one of, if not these best I can't talk. I almost said Best Picture. This is one of the best films of the year. I'm stunned by what I saw last night.
Yeah, and to correct you, Joe, yes, you did see it, but we saw it. We got together to see this shit in IMAX.
yeah, that's fair. Had a nice trip out to Stony Brook.
But yeah, I'm in the same. Typically, I do for myself. I do read the book before I watch the movie. I just didn't have time this time. But even me not going in completely knowledgeable as far as the source material in the book and having fully read that, me personally, again, you also have, like Denis Villeneuve, I love him too. I love Arrival. I love Sicario. I really like his style and how he tells his story. So going in, I was already excited just from the trailers alone. This felt epic. This felt just surreal. And throughout the movie, I was awake the entire time. The best thing I can describe this movie, it is dense as far as story and just narratively and lore and history, as well as epic on a visual scale that reminds me things like Lord of the Rings and just those epic wide shots and pictures that you normally see. To me, every shot was like a freaking painting, and it was just beautiful watching it. And the sound design of the machines, it felt I was actually in this world, and I was in with these characters, and I felt definitely certain character moments throughout the film. And the music by Hans Zimmer is just top notch. It was just a fantastic. This is why movie theaters exist. I think this movie really shows as far as why you go to a theater, why you see it in IMAX, why you see it in these different formats. And it was just spectacular across the entire board for me.
Yep, and again, I'm happy that you said the note about seeing this in theaters, because this is also streaming simultaneously on HBO Max, and I'm going to be honest, this is not something you should watch for the first time on HBO Max at home. You need to see this on the biggest screen possible, because the small screen can't fully appreciate the epic scale of this film. this movie is just massive in every sense of the word. It's very ambitious. There's a lot going on a technical end of things, on a narrative and emotional end of things. This starting off on like the visual end of things too. Like I remember thinking to myself throughout the film, like just being blown away by like every image, and I'm thinking to myself like, oh my god, this is how far we've come with technical and visual filmmaking. Like this is where we are. This in itself feels like a landmark. Like I remember when Avatar came out over a decade ago, like that movie was a landmark in in the visual departments, and again, just as far as like what we could do with movies. Titanic before that, Lord of the Rings, around that same time, Jurassic Park, you go on and on and on throughout history, Star Wars, this movie feels like that sort of moment.
Yeah.
And again, I think that definitely helps bring me into the film as well. Again, like the mark, and again, I've said this before on this show too, and I'll continue to say this as long as I talk about movies. The mark of a truly great job directing is when you feel like you're in the world of the film. And I felt like the entire time, the entire 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 35 minutes, I was part of this world again. But because of the visuals, because of the sound, because of the emotion. Denis Villeneuve he used every asset that he could to bring me in. This is easily the biggest movie that he's ever done. And honestly, it may or may not be my favorite movie from him now. I really got to think about this a bit more, but this is without a doubt the biggest film that he's ever done. Because again, from everything that I just said, from all the lore and the world building, there's just so much that can be used to bring you in, and he uses every single thing that he can to bring you in. One thing I will say though, as far as like the lore and the world building, like we've been talking about, it might be a little hard to follow certain things if you didn't read the book. That I will say. But in terms of like a narrative structure too, I remember having a conversation with someone recently on a job that I was on a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about like film and writing or whatnot, and I said something along the lines of like writing is when you're invested and whatnot, and like what's going on and who it's happening to, and he said something along the lines of writing is really good for a film when you feel like it's happening to you. And I felt that, again, throughout the entire runtime of the film. Every bit of despair, every bit of tension, I felt like that was happening to me. There comes a point where, like, shit really hits the fan, and I'm like, oh, man, like, this is fucking, like, this is serious, like, this is fucking real. But, like, no, I felt like this movie had just so much going for it. And now, again, something else to keep in mind as well, this is a part one. Again, it's obvious about that from the beginning when the title says Dune, Part 1. And it definitely feels like that. It definitely left me wanting more, but not in a bad way. Like, I was still satisfied with what I got. Because, again, like, this still works well as a film on its own. Because it definitely, again, has that narrative structure. It has that climax. And it has that send-off and resolution that leaves you wanting more. And again, after reading the book too, I remember thinking to myself, like, this is how the movie feels like it should be.
Yeah, like for me, again, and you were talking about how, like, if you didn't read the book, it might be hard to follow. I think to a certain degree that is true. As well as the movie, I think this is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, mainly the beginning, because it is a very slow-paced movie. But it is for a reason. Because it's so dense and full of just stuff you want to pay attention to visually. You want to hear everything. And so for me...
And epic, too.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, even though I haven't read the book, I actually thought I was following it pretty well. I was like, okay, this seems like... And I think this is mainly because, at least for me personally, this might be the sci-fi fan in me. I kind of just piece certain things from other pieces of science fiction works. I was like, oh, okay, this is that. That's that. And I was asking you questions a bit afterwards just to make sure I was on the right page. And it seems like I was. So, but yeah, so like this movie overall, it was, if anything, if I do have one gripe with it, and this was, as we're watching it, I do find some of the transitions very abrupt, especially visually, because you will be in one area that is tonally and visually different, then all of a sudden the screen lightens up, and I'm just like, okay, that was a bit much. And then they kind of do it back and forth pretty quickly. So it's like, it wants you to settle into one look, and then all of a sudden they want you to be like, oh, are you awake? Good. Here's another scene that's a bit more, that's brighter and everything. And I was just like, oh, god dang. And they did it quite often, where to me, I was just like, this is kind of getting annoying, mainly because it was happening a bit quicker and too quickly, and not letting me settle in, only on certain points. That's really the biggest, the only complaint I could think of at this moment, as far as the film and my first viewing and my opinion and everything. But other than that, like you said, Denis Villeneuve use everything to his advantage. And I think this movie also shows the evolution of how he interpreted and utilized sound in Arrival, and up the ante in it in this one, because Arrival was very language based. It was a movie of dissecting language, and communicating. Love it. Where this one, it was like, okay, he knew what he was doing in Arrival, took those audio cues and everything, and just upped the goddamn ante in this one. He just upped everything. So for me, the sci-fi fan in me loved it. I want to read the book now. I'm very happy I saw it in IMAX. I'm very happy. More importantly, I'm happy I was able to see it with a bunch of friends, and we all got to talk about it afterwards. Again, and how we all pretty much were on the same page, enjoying the movie and discussing it. Because that's the great thing about movie theaters. And Dune, I think, really encapsulates why we still need theaters, even if we have the streaming stuff. This is the movie that perfectly encapsulates everything of what's great with cinema.
Yeah, and again, I'm in the same exact boat as you. And again, this movie not only encapsulates the movie theater experience, I feel like it encapsulates the movie making process. Like, after watching this film, a film like this makes me want to make films even more. Because again, this movie is just spectacular on every single level, from a technical level, from an emotional level, to a storytelling level, just on every freaking level. This movie gets it right. As far as the transitions, I remember that was another thing that we were talking about. I honestly didn't have an issue with that. But again, just everything else, like performances across the board, great cast, was used very well. Hans Zimmer, honestly, in my opinion, he's the best living film composer today. I know a lot of people are going to say John Williams, and obviously he's given us a lot of iconic sounds too. He's given us a lot of iconic themes. Hans Zimmer will always be my favorite. From The Lion King to Inception, and again, Dune is no exception to any of this. So again, this is just another movie that has everything right, that has everything going for it. This feels like the Lord of the Rings of our time.
Exactly. And for me, honestly, I think looking back from all the movies we've seen and I have seen within the past 5 years, this is probably one of my favorite freaking movies I've ever seen so far. In the past 3 years, 3 to 5 years. This is probably one, more than the comic book stuff I love and other things. This movie is probably one of my favorites right now, and I freaking love everything. Yeah,
and again, just something epic like this. Like, this is probably, I can't imagine something on a bigger scale coming out this year, right? Unless my memory is escaping me. Maybe Eternals or something like that, because I'm hearing a lot about that film as well. But something as epic and ambitious as this, as spectacular as this on every single level, I can't imagine anything else beating this for 2021. And again, maybe I'm wrong. It's still October. A lot of great movies are, supposed to be coming out from now to the end of the year. But just something quite like this, I don't think anything else this year, or really for many years to come, is going to be able to mimic this.
Mm-hmm. And I also will want to say this about Dune. As much as I loved it and I liked how it was a part one, I am worried about it as far as its box office performance, because it was a simultaneous release on HBO Max. Know people are gonna pirate it, maybe watch it on HBO Max in general, and
it's already been leaked.
General. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's unfortunate, because this is just such a beautifully lit movie. Sounded amazing. It felt thrilling from the score to the eeriness of even one of the villains, the enemies. it encapsulated almost all why I love sci-fi as one of my favorite genres and why I love writing sci-fi. This really does it, and it's unfortunate. To me, it's an HBO Max simultaneous release because it's like I don't see you obviously you actually can't see it at home, but to really be immersed in this, I highly recommend Dolby Cinema, IMAX, the best of the best theater to see this film in. If anything, rewatch it on HBO Max. I have a feeling people will rewatch this movie because of how dense it is and just how much information is there. But regardless, absolutely stunning, amazing, loved it. And I'm telling you, even though it was a simultaneous release on HBO Max, if for any reason Venom Let There Be Carnage outperformed this, I'm gonna have a problem.
Yeah, really. And again, the fact that there's honestly, with the fact that this is going to be on HBO Max too, there's a very strong chance that Venom Let There Be Carnage could outperform Dune, which again, I'm going to be honest, you and I are on the same page. Dune obviously deserves to do much better than Venom Let There Be Carnage. But again, the fact that so many films have gotten that simultaneous, at home and theatrical release, I'm going to be honest, with Dune in particular, I think that's going to go down as a very, very bad decision. I hope I'm wrong, but
same here.
I just don't understand. Yeah, I just don't understand, why you wouldn't want to go to the theater, to the biggest screen that you can, to see something as big as this. Like you said, to build on your point, movies like this are the reason we go to the movies.
Hell yeah!
Well said. So yeah, again, just in closing, this is definitely worth the 2 hours and 35 minutes. This is worth the drive out that we took to Stony Brook. I can say that a little easier because I wasn't driving, but still, I think it was worth the ride. And again, for all you guys that are still with us, what did you think of Dune? Did it leave you wanting more? Were you satisfied with what we've got so far? Comment wherever it is that you can. And just like that, that's a wrap for today's show. Don't forget to like, follow, share, subscribe, and hit the bell to get all notifications, whether you're on Google Podcasts, Listen Notes, the Podcast Index, Stitcher, and more. And follow our social media pages in the description.